Outside in Leicester Square on a mild but breezy evening, the crowds are waiting for the arrival of the royal party, well, both royal parties actually, for the London premiere of Back to the Future. This is a film about an American teenager who's transported back in time to join his own parents during their high school days. The executive producer was the eternally, phenomenally successful Steven Spilberg. And a little while ago, as the crowds were beginning to gather, I asked Mr. Spilberg exactly what his job as executive producer entailed.
Well, the first thing that it meant for me was to collect all the talented people and combine them to make Back to the Future. Initially, it meant getting Bob Zemeckis, the director, to agree to direct his own script, because Bob had written the script 5 years before he made the movie, and it had gone around as a kind of writing sample. People would always say, you know, the best thing they wrote was this thing called Back to the Future. And Bob was just never, I think, that excited to make it. He was excited to have, having written it, that in itself was satisfying. And he went on to other things like Romancing the Stone. And I remember after I saw Romancing, I said, you've got to make this movie next. And Bob hemmed and hawed, and I kind of twisted his arm a little bit to make it.
Isn't it one, though, that you'd have liked to direct? Because it has the complete Spielberg feel about it. I can imagine you directing this film.
I think I would have loved to have done this film 3, 4, or 5 years ago. But right now it was so much fun just being a part of it and producing it and watching it evolve and become an exciting project that I no longer have that sense of adventure. There's a different kind of challenge in my life now that fascinates me more than just the fantasy adventure movie.
You started off with Eric Stoltz playing the main role in the film. Then you changed to Michael J. Fox. Why did you do that, and how did you feel about telling Eric Stoltz that he was no longer needed?
Well, the decision to cast Eric Stoltz was a decision that was made jointly between Bob and myself. I consulted on most of the casting, and we both agreed that Eric would be fine to play the part, but as the weeks wore on, and we were about 4 weeks into the movie, Eric, who was turning in a terrifically dramatic performance, and he's a wonderful actor, by the way, he's a very, very good actor, he wasn't mining the humor that Bob Zemeckis was trying to pull out of him. And Bob was becoming less enchanted and a little more worried as days went on. His performance was remarkable, but the humor wasn't there as much as Bob had hoped for, and so it was a very hard decision, especially 4.5 weeks into principal photography, to replace Eric and hope that we could get Michael Fox. Michael was actually Robert Zemeckis' first choice. But he had a TV series in America that precluded his doing Back to the Future at that time.
You've often said that your films reflect, and to some extent, I think, exorcise your own childhood. Is there any part of Back to the Future with which you particularly identify? Are you the Michael J. Fox character, or are you the rather wimpish young father?
I think I'm the young father.
You know that with this, and Jaws, and Raiders, and E.T., of the top 10 money-making films of all time, you've made at least half. Do you ever feel that you're in danger of being remembered at a future date, not so much for the films, but for the money you make? Is that a fear of yours?
Well, I think I've always worried about that, but not to the exclusion that I would turn to myself and say, gee, I don't want to make any more successful pictures because I don't want to be remembered for the money. I'm not that naive.
You said just a few minutes ago that you'd moved away a little bit from the kind of films that you used to make. Does that mean that you are no longer making the films that Steven Spielberg, the teenager, would have liked? Because I think that was one of the great reasons for your success. You made the films that you'd have liked when you were young. Are you not doing that anymore?
Well, I think I'm living more of a schizophrenic life now. I'm making those films that I still remember as a child and the kind of films that I would like to see as an audience. But I'm also, as a director, beginning to move out of that arena to make movies that are a little more personal and private, films that perhaps wouldn't have such a broad appeal. I mean, Peter Pan notwithstanding, which will be a project of ours, but putting that aside, there's several pictures that I'm getting involved with today that are not what you would call general audience Saturday matinee pictures.
Because there seemed at one point to be a slight danger, perhaps, that you go the way of your friend George Lucas and become a producer rather than a director, but I don't see you doing that somehow.
Well, you know, directing is so terribly hard. All the filmmakers who are listening to this are going like this, yeah, it is, and everybody who isn't says it seems so easy when we watch the movies. But it's so hard that I really can only, I think, my energy can carry me to about a movie every 18 to 24 months as a director. Producing is not as difficult, I must say. It's not as rewarding either.
Michael, your first starring role, Back to the Future, were you surprised by the impact the film had had?
Yeah, I was surprised. Well, I expected the film to do well, and when I say do well, I mean, you know, make a profit or whatever, would satisfy the studios because of the people associated with it, Steven and whatnot. But for it to come out and do as well as it did, I mean, I don't even look at the totals anymore. It's scary.
Breathtaking they are.
It
I
is.
tell you.
It's frightening. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I don't have to add it up, and I'm almost as glad I don't have to add it up as I am sorry that I don't get to keep it. You know.
I bet it kind of made too much difference to your own personal fame because you're very well known in America with your TV series, Family Ties, aren't you?
It amazes me because a television show, when it's popular, is seen by, I don't know, 50 million people or whatever a week. A greater number of people than will ever see most movies. I mean, I think that more people see Family Ties in a night than see Jaws, will or have seen Jaws. Our producer told me that once. So you wouldn't expect it to make that much difference. Yet when you come out with a film like Back to the Future, all of a sudden it just quadruples the amount of attention you get. And I don't really understand it, but I can't honestly say that I don't like it.
Now you replaced Eric Stoltz eventually in the role of Marty McFly. How did you feel about that? I mean, presumably you were quite pleased to get the part.
Well, I had a lot of feelings. I had real mixed emotions about it. It is, in my way of thinking, the actor's nightmare to start a project and for something to happen and to have to leave it under whatever circumstance. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. But as I talked to Steven and Bob Zemeckis and whatnot, I found it was a very mutual thing, and they were very compassionate and very understanding in the way that they dealt with him. And when I understood that after talking to them, that they weren't saying, well, you know, dump this guy and you'll come in or whatever. It was just they spoke very highly of Eric, and that impressed me, and that made it an easier thing for me to step into.
What do you think of Steven Spilberg now?
I think he's great. I named one wing of my house after him. No,
he needs that?
No, I think he's a terrific man, a terrific filmmaker, and he is. The thing that strikes you most about him is being in his situation. He could be a Louis B. Mayer or whatever, the stereotypical mogul or whatever. He's not. He's an artist and a filmmaker and a man who likes to be surrounded with creative people, Bob Zemeckis, people like that, and give them the room to exercise their own creativity. And so he's not. He's out to make films first, buck second, and to treat people accordingly.
You had one hell of a workload when you were making this film, didn't you? Because you were making a TV series at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
How did you cope with that?
Well, it was tough doing both at the same time. But on the other hand, I kind of, when you take a challenge, when you take on something, you say you're going to do it, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And in the course of doing it, sitting back and saying, "Oh, geez, boy, I'm tired, I'm bushed," is not going to do you a whole lot of good. Second of all, when you have a job that you love, you know, you show up for work and you're excited about doing it, and getting on with the business of doing it. And with me, that just happened twice a day. You know, it happened in the morning, and then it happened at night.
Did you sleep?
A little bit. I slept about 4 or 5 hours a night. I'd have drivers come pick me up in the morning and bring me in at night. Sometimes they'd carry me in and dump me on my bed at night. So there were a lot of people who made life easy for me and went out of their way to be understanding during that time.
Well, finally, Michael, here we are at this royal premiere. Huge, great crowd standing behind us now as we talk.
I'm not nervous at all.
What do you make of an occasion like this?
It's wonderfully exciting. I mean, it's a once in a lifetime thing. If indeed it is only once in a lifetime for me, I'll die satisfied.